Hi guys, Dave Zeidel here. I'm going to take you through an example that will help you hopefully with your pivot tables to understand how to use pivot tables to answer a whole lot of different types of questions relating to a data set. This is important because in your final exam you will have some questions related to a data set that is not too dissimilar from this, and you will need to answer questions that would most probably be similar to the ones I'm going to be asking you here. So this is a way of understanding pivot tables, but also how to answer some of the questions. So this is a good summary for you to go through before the final exam. Here we've got a table, and the table is giving you some information. It's first giving you store ID, region, store type, advertising, number of staff, your competitors' advertising, a quality rating, and turnover in thousands. So you've got a database which is populated with a whole lot of this information. This data contains information from a company that specializes in food and drink. The company has 25 shops around Joburg and uses salespeople who are store-based. The variables in the database are as follows. Store ID. This is a unique identifier for each store. Region. That means that the region of these stores is either in the West Rand, the East Rand, or Joburg South. Store type. These will either be food or drink stores. Advertising. This is the amount of advertising each store spends per month. Number of staff. This is the number of staff based at each store. Please note, this is not the staff number, it's the number of staff. So it's not just the random number that the company would give as your employee ID number, for instance. It's the actual number of people working in that specific store. Competitor advertising is the amount of advertising that your competitor would spend per month. Quality rating is just a rating of the store from 1 through to 4. So it's either 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1 is best, 4 is worst. And your turnover is the amount in thousands of rands that each store sells per month. So this is the data that the following questions are going to be based on. We have these 7 questions that we're going to be looking at. Let's look at each one in turn. So let's look at that first one, question 1. What is the total turnover in the West Rand? And what I'm looking at is looking at this whole data set and looking at the turnover in the West Rand. So I'm going to say turnover, and I'm going to highlight turnover to put it in yellow. That's one of the things we're looking at. What else are we looking at? In the West Rand. The West Rand is one of the regions. So I'm going to highlight the region as well. So now I'm going to use the pivot table to answer this. You could answer it in different ways, but let's look at the pivot table. I'm going to say insert pivot table. It's now asking me for the range. I'm going to select the entire table that we're looking at for the range. I would normally open this in a different worksheet, but I'm going to do it in here so we can see what we're doing. And I click OK, and now it's giving me the pivot table fields. At the top here, you can see it says pivot table fields. What are the 2 things that we looked at in yellow? We're looking to understand the region, so I'm going to tick region, and we're looking at turnover, and I'm going to tick on turnover. It will automatically populate it in some way for me. There's regions. There's sum of turnover. If you are looking at it differently, you can shift these into different places. Okay, so it might have given you the region. It might have just given it to you like that, where it's given you a sum of turnover and count. That's not what I want. I want to see the region over here. And if I click on this, it's giving me the rows, which is telling me the different areas and the sum of the turnover. And we're looking at what is the total turnover in the West Rand. There's my West Rand. There's my sum of turnover. So it's already giving me that. and that would now become my answer. And my answer for this first one would be 1061.30. Clicking on the pivot table again, if I click on over here, it will open it up for me, and instead of sum, it might have been something else. So you could change it to average. If I click OK, it would give me a different answer. So your pivot table will default to something. If it's defaulting to the wrong thing, you can click on it and then try and change what you're looking at. In this case, I clicked on the average, and I actually wanted, it said, what is the total? The total is the sum of, and if I click OK, that gives me back to what my answer is. So that's answering the first question. What is the total turnover in the West Rand? Let's move on to question 2. Question 2 is saying to me, what is the turnover in thousands per staff member in Joburg? So we're looking at what is the turnover. Again, we want the turnover. So I'm going to paint the turnover in yellow. What is the turnover per staff member? So we want to know the number of staff. So I'm going to paint that in yellow as well. And then in Joburg South. So we also want to know the region. So as you can see, the most important thing is to first of all determine what are the elements we're going to be looking at. Now, let's create our pivot table. And I'm going to go Insert, Pivot Table. It's asking me to highlight it again. So I'm going to highlight the whole pivot table. And you can see the table range A1 to H27. In this case, it's in the existing worksheet. Then it goes over here. I'm going to highlight those 3 things in yellow. Region, or tick them. Staff number and turnover. It is now giving me some of that information. It's giving me the region and the sum of staff number and the sum of turnover. If I close the pivot table, let's have a look at what it's giving me. It's giving me the number of staff members. It's giving me this number of the amount of turnover, the total of the turnover. And the question was that answering that, it says, what is the turnover per staff member? What we're looking at is per staff member. So what I could do is I could say, what is the turnover? Here's the sum of the turnover for Joburg South. And I'm going to divide that by the number of staff members in Joburg South. And I will get to this number. And it gives me 32.59. And that is my answer for the second one. So I'm using a combination of the pivot table and then doing a sum outside the pivot table. So that's how I would answer question 2. Let's move on to question 3. So question 3 is asking me the question, what is the median value of advertising for all food stores? Now the issue with this is that we've got a whole mixture of food and drink stores over here. So what I'd like to do first is I need to sort out the table. So let's highlight the entire table, including the headings, so I can use the headings when I sort. And you go, so you highlight the whole table and you go data sort. I'm saying it has got headings and I'm sorting by store type. And if I say OK, it is now going to sort this out for me in terms of the drink stores first and then the food stores. It'll put it in alphabetical order. The question is, what is the median value for advertising for all food stores? So we're only looking at the food stores. So we're looking at this set over here, only the food stores. Now we're looking for the median. The median is the middlemost one. Now that we've sorted it, all I can do, or I can do it in a number of different ways. Let me explain to you. The easiest way is we can now do the median of just those food stores. So I say equals median, and I highlight just the food stores, and we're looking at advertising. So I highlight all of those, and I close the brackets, and I hit enter, and it gives us the median of 5250. And that now is my median. As simple as that. Let me explain to you the concept of median again. The median is your middlemost point. Okay? What you want to do is you want to find the one that's in the middle. Now, if I take just the food stores and I sort these in order, so I go data sort, and I want to sort it in order of advertising, and my advertising one is in column E, so I'm going to sort it by E. So I've sorted it first. I want to find the middlemost one. How do I do it? What you're really doing is you take off the top one, you take off the bottom one. You then take off the top one, and you take off the bottom one. And we carry on doing that. I'm going to take off the top three, and I'm going to take off the bottom three. Just in order to go a little bit faster, I'm going to take off the next two, and then the bottom two. And what I'm left with are these two in the middle. And I'm going to put them in a green, and it's 5,000 and 5,500. If I was left with one, that would be the answer. If I'm left with two, I've got to average these two. So what I do is I add that one plus that one, and I divide by 2, and I get the same answer. That is a little bit complicated way around, and here we've only got 16 data points. What happens if we had a lot more data points? You would need to know which position is that middlemost one. Now the formula for the middlemost one is it's n plus 1 divided by 2. That is the formula for this. And that formula is for the position, not the answer. This is not the answer. This is the position we're looking at. What do I mean by the position? We have 16 data points. So if I take 16 plus 1, that equals 17. And I take that and I divide that whole thing by 2. So, okay, let's just do it like that, equals 17. And then I say 17 divided by 2, and that will give me an answer. And the answer will be 8.5. And this is the 8.5th position. So my answer is not 8.5, it's the 8.5th position. What does that mean? I can start down over here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is 5 and 5.5. And again, I can average those two. So it's telling me where to go to. So this little formula will give me 8.5th position. Or I just know I go to position 8 and 9 and I average those two. Let me highlight that in yellow so you can see it. And I average those two. Again, the same way of doing it. Easier just to do the median calculation. It does it for you already. You do not have to pre-sort it. I just explain this extra bit so that you understand what the median is. It's the middlemost point. Okay, let's move on to question 4. Question 4 says, what is the average quality index for all East Rand drink stores? Here we're having a look at this and saying, what is the quality index? Where do we look at that? We're looking at the quality rating. So I'm going to highlight quality rating. Quality index for East Rand. So we're looking at the region of the East Rand. And then we're looking for drink stores only. So it's the store type. So here again, I'm highlighting these three things that I'm going to be using in the pivot table. So let's insert the pivot table. By the way, your position of where you put your cursor right now will be the start of the pivot table. And I'm going to go to pivot table. And again, I'm going to highlight this range from A1 all the way through to H27. And I go OK. And here again, I've got my pivot table information. I'm going to highlight the yellow bits, the region. I'm going to not highlight, tick. I'm going to tick the store type, and I'm going to click the quality rating. These are the three things that we've got. Now, I'm looking for what is the average quality. So I need to look at the sum of the quality, which I've got over here, and I need to count the stores because now I can get the average quality. And I'm looking at the region, and I can then work it out for myself, and I can say we're looking at the East Rand. There's the East Rand, 23 divided by 7, and it'll give me that rating, if I put it to 2 decimal places, of 3.29. And there's my answer of 3.29. What I could do is I could actually, instead of having the count of the one and the count of the other, instead of getting sum, I want to get the average. I can click on quality rating. I can click on average. And straight away, I can see what the average is, and if I get it to 2 decimal places, there it gives me the average quality rating for the East Rand is 3.29. Again, just two ways of calculating that. Again, great. Let's go to the next question. Question 5 is saying, what is the standard deviation of the number of staff in Joburg South? What are we looking at? We're looking at the number of staff. So I'm going to highlight staff. I'm looking at the region, Joburg South. These are the two things I'm looking at. And we go and we do the same thing again. Insert, pivot table, highlight the pivot table. Say OK, here's a pivot table, and I'm going to click on region, and I'm going to click on number of staff. And we're saying, what is the standard deviation of the number of staff in Joburg South? What we're looking at is, if you click on the sum, it gives you the option. We're looking at standard deviation. By the way, standard deviation, you've got normal standard deviation or standard deviation P. Normal deviation, standard deviation, is one we would usually use, and that is a standard deviation of the sample. If you're taking a sample of everything, the standard dev P is of the entire population. In this particular case, our whole population is in here because we've only got 25 stores, and here are all 25 stores. So it's the whole population. So we use, in this case, standard dev P, and I click OK, and it is now giving me the standard deviation. What is the standard deviation of the number of staff in Joburg South? And if I have a look at this, and let's put it to 2 decimal places, you can see that standard deviation of the entire population of the number of staff in Joburg South is 1.41, and that now becomes your answer, and it's 1.41. Let's look at question 6. Question 6 says, which combination of region and store type has the highest number of staff? So we're looking at region, so I'm going to highlight region. We're looking at store type, and then we're looking at the number of staff. So I've highlighted these three things. Let's do the pivot table. So we say insert pivot table, and then we need to highlight the range we're looking at. So I'm going to highlight the whole table, and I say OK, and it now gives us the pivot table, but I need to tick the areas I'm looking for, those three yellow things: the region, the store type, and the number of staff. And now it's giving me some form of information, but it's not exactly what I want, because I'm looking for a combination of region and store type. Here I've got a row of region, but I also want the store type. So I'm going to take the store type and move it across. And now what it gives me is, it's telling me in the East Rand, there's only a drink store. In Joburg South, there's drink and food, and West Rand, only food, and the number of staff. We're looking at the combination, which combination of region and store type has the highest number of staff. So we have East Rand drink has 36. Joburg South drink has 12. Joburg South food has 39, and West Rand food has 38. So it is Joburg South with food has the highest one, which is 39. And that now becomes our answer, where it's Joburg food, Joburg South food. A little bit confusing here because the East Rand only has drink stores and the West Rand only has food stores. It's Joburg South has both, but if we look at the combination, the one with the highest number on its own is 39, and that would be Joburg South food. Question 7. Let's look at question 7. Question 7 says, what proportion or percentage of all staff does the West Rand food store have? So let's highlight what we need to highlight again. So if we have a look at this, what proportion of all staff? So we're looking at staff. So I can highlight staff. And West Rand food stores have. So West Rand would be a region, and food stores would be a store type. So we're highlighting these three things, and let's go again and let's do a pivot table. So I'm going to insert pivot table. I'm going to highlight the table I'm looking at. I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to click on region, store type, and number of staff. Now it's giving me a table with information, but it's not the type of information I want. I need to change something. What proportion or percentage of all staff? So I'm looking at the percentage of the staff, and also I'm looking at a combination of the region and the store type. So I'm going to take region and store type, and I'm going to move the store type. So we got a row for both of those. And now I'm going to put in the percentage, not some of the staff, but I want to look at the proportion of the staff. So if I go to this table and I look, it says sum over here, and I click over here and I go percentage. And if I look, it says sum, count, average, doesn't have the percentage there. What you need to do, and this might be slightly different depending on your version of Excel, I go show data as. I've got over here show data as. So not summarized, but show data as. If I click on this, it'll now show me, and I can click on down and try to find something. Percentage of. Okay. And it's a percentage of, what am I looking at the percentage of? the grand total. And if I click on that, I can see that when I have a look at West Rand and I look at food, there's a West Rand food store, it's 30.40. And that's how I get to that answer. And so these are 7 questions which are showing you how to use the pivot table in order to work them. Some of these you could find them in different ways. Try get used to using the pivot table. It's the quickest way of doing these calculations. Remember, these are the steps. First step is determine which are the things that you need to look at. Is it the store ID, the region, etc.? Highlight those. Then open your pivot table, highlight the entire field you need to look at, and then tick the appropriate ones to look at your answer, and then move the fields around so that it gives you the information in the way that you want to see it. I hope this video has been useful to you to be able to use the pivot table, because in your final exam you are going to need to be able to use the pivot table, and I hope this will teach you how to do that.